All right, welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Saturday, February 17th, 2024. Let's get right into our report. Our solar wind speed's coming in at 457 kilometers per second with a density of 5.86. Pardon me. All right, we're back. Sunspot number 97, although we have seen quite a bit of action this week, and I'll get into that. That is part of our report today. Our KP indices are low right now, both at a 1 for current conditions, and 24-hour max is also at a 1. That could change. Cosmic radiation dosage rate is right now is down 6.3%. 48-hour change of 0.8%, so almost a full percentage in drops in cosmic radiation rates. Now, this is not that high as far as maximums go. It can get a lot worse than this. It's stayed pretty moderate, but what happens during a during a maximum cycle, the magnetosphere gets a little bit stronger, and it doesn't allow as much cosmic radiation that we've had, especially during the last minimum that we just came out of. But studies are showing that the magnetosphere is weakening. Even though we are in a maximum, it's still weaker than what it was, say, 2 or 3 solar cycles ago, especially solar cycle 23. So, with that being said, I think it is a slower rate of a drop in the cosmic radiation dosage rates in the atmosphere. And I was kind of talking to somebody about this the other day, but if you've noticed, like, we're still getting these weird freak storms. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not dismissing the disasters that happen across this planet, but they don't seem to be in such a high frequency like they were during solar minimum. So with that said, it's a good thing that we are in a maximum part of our cycle, getting all of this solar activity that we've seen here in the past 7 days. And let's go ahead and also good news, only a 5% chance of X-class flares. I know there was a concern for the weekend with this particular sunspot that unleashed a strong solar flare, and that if we had any kind of eruption this weekend, that it could have, quite an effect on satellites. As Mari reported, it was not good. So the good news is the chance of X-class flares has dropped significantly from 25% yesterday to 5% today. So let's hope that that is the case. But we have dodged a few bullets. And let's check out our topics here that we're going to be covering today on this on our show. Actually, let's go to the grandsolarminimum.com first. I wanted to show you guys. Basically, this is the weekend review of solar flares. Look at these eruptions. There's the 16th. That was the 15th. Here's the one on the 16th. 2. Look at that. That was the last one. That was the X-class flare. So it'll replay. And this is just in the past 7 days. Now, again, we are in a maximum. So we're going to have this kind of activity. But this last solar flare that we had, the 6 or the X6, the X2.2, and the one prior to that, the M9, very strong. You might as well call that an X-class flare. It was percentage points away from being an X-class flare, according to Mari. She had reported to me on that one. Check out SDO. Looking at sunspot activity again. Sunspot number 97. Last time we did a broadcast, I believe we were at 155. So we have seen a drop in sunspots, but that's typical during the cycle. You'll have your days where we have quiet days where it's 40, 50 sunspots, and then it peaks back up again in the mid 100s. So this to me indicates 2 things. This indicates, for me, this is how we find out that we're in the middle of the peak. One, the wave of the activity and the strength of these solar flares, and B, the location of the solar or the sunspots that we are experiencing right now. I'll show you what I'm talking about. The more that we see these sunspots in the middle, the more we know that we are very, very close from the end of the maximum. And right now, you can clearly see the southern hemisphere sunspots are making their homes in the middle portion of our star. Northern sunspots also have been indicating the dive to the middle as well. So we're getting closer and closer, not quite there, but once we see this band of sunspots just become one, that's how we'll know that this solar cycle is beginning to go into its minimum. And again, it was forecast to go into its minimum well after 25. In fact, the peak of this cycle was predicted in 2025. Here we are in 24, and I believe the peak is on the way, but it's just maybe a few months early. And then we start to see minimum conditions starting in 2025. Right now, the sun is not showing any signs of minimum conditions, not with the action that we've had this week. And I'll get into that. Let's start off with last week's explosion. We already reported on this last week. First, we had the X 3.3 solar flare. Okay. And then almost immediately after that, we deal with another. This one is an Earth-facing sunspot, 3576, and we get an M.9, which is almost an X-class flare. This one is a little peculiar to me, and maybe some of you in the chat can give me a little insight on why we didn't see any kind of geomagnetic activity from this particular solar flare. It was interesting because this was almost a direct shot at Earth, and the strength of it, you would have expected at least a G1 or a G2 storm from the impact of the CME. But none of that happened. It actually canceled out. So interesting, this was strong, but we didn't see much effect. They did cancel the storm they had, and then right after that, again, AR 3576, 6.5, an M 6.5. They put us back on another moderate geomagnetic storm watch because this particular sunspot just keeps spitting out solar flares. And finally, once again, guess who? That's right. AR 3576 strikes again, but this is some magnificent footage. The picture here says it all. I'm going to zoom this in a little bit because I want to see the advert on the side. It's just incredible what. Now this one, we're still trying to gather information, but I will read the report here from watchers.com. Actually, surprisingly, not what I was hoping for from these guys, so we'll just go back over here. Spaceweather.com reports that AR 3576 once again erupted on February 16th, producing a brief but intense X-class flare at 2.5. The SDO observed huge plumes of plasma fly away from the blast site, and that is a huge plume, folks. As these images show, AR 3576 is near the sun's western limb, no longer facing Earth. You might think that means our planet is safely outside the line of fire, but in fact, it's the opposite. And this article here kind of rehashes what Mari had talked about in her report on yesterday. So, still no real update just yet about what the impact of this particular solar flare. They didn't even address if we're under any kind of geomagnetic storm watch, did they? No, I don't think so. Let's go down here to the bottom. Usually, nope, nothing yet. So we'll continue to monitor this situation. You would think that with the amount of plasma, I mean, again, we've dodged another bullet. And this has been a busy week. And out of the entire cycle, this is where I feel like we're seeing the peak right now of this cycle. With the amount of strong solar flares that we've had, the amount of X-class flares that we've had. We've almost had 3 out of 4 this week. We barely missed the X class on the M9 that was Earth facing. So to me, with sunspot numbers earlier at 155, and we've seen them staying in the low 100s for the most part, but they've been consistently in the 155s when we see the activity flare up on the sun. I feel like with the amount of solar flares that we are seeing our maximum peak right now. Another reason why I'm saying this as well is that during the peak is when your magnetosphere is the strongest. And right now, it appears that our magnetosphere has possibly repelled the effects of that M9 because it is strengthened just a tad bit more if we are indeed in a peak. Now, it's still weak. I'm not saying that it's at the strongest ever, but it's stronger than what it was during the minimum. And during a minimum, having an explosion like that being hurled at us, it's likely that we could have seen G1 storms. So this is just more proof of how this works between Earth and our star, right? And it makes sense when you've been following it for a little while and understand that during solar minimum, you have lower sunspot activity. And when the sun is not producing as much, that means its output is also lower, TSI, which is total solar irradiance. And when the sun is weaker, the magnetic connection from the sun to the earth is also weaker, which then in turn weakens our magnetosphere. And when the magnetosphere is weakened, you're now allowing more cosmic radiation / highly charged particles into your atmosphere. This is all just the nature of the existence of the sun and the planets in the solar system. It's not just Earth that's experiencing these changes. I actually was going to do a live broadcast a couple months ago about a paper talking about all the changes in the solar system. I'm going to dig it back up. I think it's something that would be worth a good conversation, maybe have a guest on the show to talk about it with us. But it's not just Earth. When the sun is weakening, it's weakening its connection to the entire solar system, not just Earth. But again, a lot of information that we deliver on this channel always correlates to what's happening. More solar activity, strengthening magnetosphere, and also temperatures this winter. It's been a mild winter. The snow has not been there. I mean, we're getting snow in the mountains in the western part of the United States, in the Rockies, but higher elevations. The Northeast is way under its average snowfall this year. Temperatures are going to be in the 60s this upcoming week for the Ohio Valley, Indiana. It's starting to feel like spring already. Puxatawny Phil was right for those folks. And even looking at the long-term forecast here in the Northeast, it was showing a cold pattern for the end of February, end of March. It's not showing that anymore. We're talking 40s rain. So again, El Nino, solar maximum at the same time during the winter months. I think this mild temperatures here in the United States makes sense to me, just based on the facts that we have provided. No surprise here. Now I know it's going to be blamed that the warming caused and triggered the climate change and all that stuff, and I get that. We can sit here and debate climate change and what causes it. The fact of the matter is that there has been documented temperature rise here, but the data that we're using, we're splicing data with current data. It's not fair, but nonetheless, it's not as drastic either. So when we're looking at solar physics and talking about the activity being low, it proves cooler temperatures, bigger rainstorms and snowstorms, earthquakes, more stronger earthquakes, more volcanic eruptions, bigger ones, not just these 15,000 foot ash plumes. We're talking 50 and higher on the normal. Earthquakes in the 7 range and higher on the normal. Getting 3 months of rain in 24 hours during a minimum was on the normal in this last minimum. That last minimum we just came out of to was one of the strongest we've had in 150 years. So all this stuff correlates, right? And I think the disclosure is coming out, but they're trying to spin it to where it doesn't make it look like it's natural. Now, this new study that this article has made its rounds, and it's impressive to read that they're making some admissions here about what happens to the AMOC if it does collapse. I mean, this is not just some made up theory that they all of a sudden came up with. Just like in the movie The Day After Tomorrow, apparently the AMOC collapsed. There was too much fresh water interrupting the current, and it instant climate shift in the northern hemisphere. In fact, this article also talks about that's where they're expecting the most ice expansion is in the northern hemisphere of the United States and other phenomena throughout the world during this time. It doesn't talk about how it comes back. I'm no expert on ocean currents. It's probably something that I would love to talk to David Verge about and get his opinions and his thoughts about how we get that current back. How does it come back? How long are we going to experience these, effects? Because I'm hearing dates of 2025 that this current could collapse, which is very interesting that it's going to be that close. Let's hypothetically say that this is true. All right, mid 2025, the AMOC collapses, which is the tipping point, obviously, to the climate here in the northern hemisphere. It could trigger a mini ice age or at least a major freeze in most parts of the northern hemisphere. On top of that, we're already cooler because we're already forecasted to be in a La Nina this fall. Like everyone is lining up on that agreement that this is going to go from El Nino to La Nina by the fall. And at its depth, its peak will be in midwinter. We also have the Milankovitch cycle that we're dealing with, the alignment of the planets in October 16th of 2024. You will see a tug from the four gas giants that will bring Earth slightly away from the sun. Not a lot, just a tiny, tiny bit. But we all know that TSI, it doesn't take much change to make an impact. So you take all of what I just said and then bring it into 2025 with the possibility of a collapse of the Gulf Stream and bringing a colder climate to the northern hemisphere. So this is going to be a very interesting year to watch from here on out until the middle of 2025. It's going to happen. We're going to see it, right? If it's not going to happen, we're not going to see it. Then obviously we're wrong, and a lot of people were wrong, and we'll move on from there. But without sparking any panic or any kind of fear porn that you always hear from some of these channels. But this is kind of something interesting to watch. We're seeing more mainstream articles admit to this possibility being here sooner. This is not a website that does climate change debates. They just report on scientific papers, weather events, seismic events. This has always been a very, very reliable website for information on pretty much every natural disaster that's ever happened on this planet in the real time sense. So trusted website, no no clickbait here. And again, it's something to think about, guys. If you live in Canada or even in the northern parts of the United States, it might be a good idea to think about relocation. Because if all this does come to fruition, and we're dealing with the collapse of the AMOC, we're dealing with conditions of the sun going back into a minimum, not quite there, but starting to lower its output already, dealing with this part of the Milankovitch cycle. It's coming up in October, the possibility of La Nina being the dominant system again. There's four factors right there, guys. So interesting stuff coming up. If you enjoyed this mild winter, remember that because I don't think we're going to get this kind of treatment next year. And it'll be very surprising to see all four of these things take place and nothing happen. Now, the good news is that the temperatures are, what, 0.88 degrees Celsius above baseline. The good news is that maybe that the first wave of really cold temperatures globally aren't as bad because we're already right now sitting at a temperature the last 4 months. Let's face it, guys, we're up there. I mean, this information comes from Dr. Roy Spencer. We've never not trusted his reliability, and we're not going to start now just because we've had back to back to back months of higher temperatures than what we've ever seen. So this could be Earth's way of trying to shield its people, giving us this buffer before the really cold stuff comes in. So you got to wonder if the whole mini ice age thing is a possibility. And when I say mini ice age, just mean that. Mini ice age means conditions that are favorable to an ice age, but not consistent enough to be an ice age. In other words, really cold winters, cool springs, and mild summers, if not cool summers. That's what that means, mini ice age. Ice age would mean it's just cold all the time, every day, no matter what part of the month it is. We're not looking at that kind of an event. But this could be a much cooler climate in the near future. So, all right, let's move on to a little bit of climate news, forecast coming up. And this is what I'm talking about with February. Just, we talked about it on the show last week, how we thought we were going to see quite a bit of snow on the 20th. That storm got pushed out to the 22nd, but we're still not seeing, actually, this is old. Let me go and update this. Okay, there we go. That probably helps. But no, we were talking about how we were expecting some big snow possibly on the 20th. They've moved that possibility to the 22nd now, but in the Northeast, I should say. But looking at this forecast, here we are, February 22nd, and it finally arrives, but it's going to be rain for the most part in the Northeast. The far northern parts will see snow, but it does change over finally by Friday, February 23rd, but still behind it, not a lot of moisture, and this light blue stuff is just lake effect. So I'm not really concerned about it. So what we thought could have been a bigger snow event in the amount of a foot or more could be just another 1 to 3 situation. But it is worth watching because of the size of this low pressure system, and there's 2 lows here involved, and the way they combine, it's a 1-2 punch. So it could still turn out to be a big event. We're still a good ways. This is 7 days away. And I always tell you, anything 6 days and over, I'm a little sketchy on. So this is barely in that threshold. So we will keep our eye on this one because this would be a pretty big storm if we get closer to this date and we see the temperatures are in line. The cold air is already in place for several days. Then we're talking more snow than rain. It's too early to see right now. Let's move on past the 24th of February. And again, pretty quiet. Lots of high pressure in the Northeast and the Northwest. And almost like another atmospheric river situation again in the West Coast. But look at all these powerful storms moving across the central part of the United States. And a lot of it is coming to us in rain. The cold air does move on. And on the back end of this, we're seeing the snowfall. But thankfully, it starts as rain because our temperatures are too warm for snow. And I'm just talking about the northeast, really, guys. I mean, the central part of the United States, you guys are seeing snow in the higher elevations. The Northeast is the only one's getting snow. Unfortunately, if you live across the Midwest, the Plain States, you're not getting any snow. Michigan, some light snow. Even here in New York, like I said, here in the Northeast, we're definitely well below average. Let's take a look at our temperature forecast. And this is why we're not seeing all the snow. It's cold right now, but that changes. And really, it does feel like spring is trying to make an entrance, guys. That cold Arctic air is getting pushed back to the north. And there's a dip right here on February 24th. Now, this is where we have to watch if this colder air that's just north of the border does decide to dip down a little further south. That means much, much colder air will be in place already ahead of this moisture system, and it'll be all snow. And that could mean a big, impactful snowstorm here in the Northeast next weekend, February 24th. But as we go through the rest of the weekend Temperatures don't stay too cold for too long. They do in the Northeast. Most of the country is starting to warm up, looking like spring. Here comes another rigid fridge by the end or the beginning of March, I should say, March 1st, but it's not, the colder air does not appear to be penetrating as far south as in the previous blast. So a lot of parts of the United States look like it's trying to warm up for spring, but this is interesting at the end of this run, March 2nd. We have another batch of really cold Arctic air approaching the Northeast. So we may not be done with winter over here and over here, but the rest of the country, I mean, good for you guys, right? Everybody's sick of this cold and rainy and snowy one day and rainy one day, and it's just unpleasant weather. I think a lot of folks are ready for some warm stuff this summer, but we got to continue to watch up here in the Northeast. I think that we're not out of the woods yet, even though we're showing up and down conditions of snow here, snow there. All right, so here's what we're thinking on snowfall, and it really depends on the makeup of this storm coming up to the Northeast and on the 24th. As you can see across the United States, the rest of this is pretty accurate. The Northern Plains, the Central Plains, the Ohio Valley, that's about accurate. And all the snow that you're seeing in the Northwest and the West Coast and the Rockies, that's all higher elevations. So right now, the Northeast is experiencing the colder part of the actual weather as far as what we're seeing weather-wise. It's wavy. The Northwest and the Northeast with higher temperatures in the states that you see that are in the white. That's the reason why there's lack of snow right now. The temperatures are much warmer than they are in the Northeast and the Northwest. Tracking El Nino, it's been pretty moderate. It's flirting with trying to drop below the 1 degree above baseline threshold. As it approaches the 0.5, it would be considered a Modaki El Nino, which is weak. And it does appear that we are starting to see this cycle wind down and switch to another La Nina, which would be 4 La Ninas to 1 El Nino here in the past few years. So there's another indication of, and again, La Ninas usually bring cooler climates, but another natural science fact that is lining up with things that cause and create cooling, especially with the AMOC. That's the most concerning as far as that goes. Hang on a second. So lots to watch, and all this stuff is really intriguing me to want to do more broadcast. Honestly, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to go over. A lot of natural cycle stuff that's really collaborating together right now to cause and create these conditions. Yes, we've seen warmer temperatures. Yes, the proof is in the pudding that we've seen this rise in temperatures over the past couple of months and over the past several years. Slight temperature rise, not a lot. Again, slight, but it makes you wonder if this isn't a good thing to be this high before the grand solar minimum kicks in all the way. Solar cycle 25 is nearing its middle part. And like I said, I think we're in the peak right now, the maximum. It's only a matter of months before we start seeing activity declining, lower solar activity settling in by mid-2025. But who cares about timelines? Prepare as much as you can. Buy books, learn how to grow, raise bed gardens, build your own greenhouse. It is possible to do it. I know a person who had a full-time job, but this person also raised chickens on their own property, grew their own food, and bartered with their neighbors in the village that she lives in for other meats. Doesn't pay for her food. Doesn't pay for her food because she raises chickens and grows vegetables and barters. That's amazing, right? We're not even in a grand solar minimum or a climate crisis or a natural disaster. There are people already functioning like this, guys. Those people are going to be fine when things get a little hairy. So that's what the mentality needs to be in the future to adapt to what's going to happen. It's going to get rough. It's not going to be catastrophic everywhere, or maybe at all, but um, it's not a bad idea to prepare. It's not a bad idea at all. And if you haven't started now, you know, let's get it going, right? All of us reading stuff like what I read today is just kind of eye opening. So I guess I'm in the mood to be alertness today. Let's see who's in the chat. It's been a while. Jesse, good to see you, my friend. Michael Crane, also good to see you as well. Melody, thank you very much for your participation as always. Peter Bray. Let's see who else we got in here. Mari, of course, manning the chat. Kathleen, hello, new user there. And many, many other people who have just popped in to say hi. We appreciate your support. Antoniello, I really butchered his name, but he's also a frequent commenter in our chat. So good to see you as well. And again, guys, Mari and I are just kind of rebuilding the channel. We're doing some reports throughout the week, and I feel like this will build momentum through time. So we appreciate you guys' patience, and just again, we are back for sure, but in the frequency of a daily show right now, it's just not possible. But again, things are getting interesting. So the sheer drive of just the passion I have for this topic will compel me to do more than just one a week. So again, thank you for your support, guys. We appreciate everything. And please share, like, subscribe. We will talk soon. Next week on Saturday at 1 p.m. is our next live report, unless, we definitely have to get on here about this solar flare. But right now, it looks like things are in the good. So our next live broadcast, expect that next week, and whenever Mari does her next video report. Until then, guys, be safe out there, and we will talk soon.